And thank you, everybody. It's just really incredible to be here. Being a speaker, it never fails to amaze me that people are willing to show up and listen to me talk about things. Even smaller gigs like this morning's one, it was amazing, and I'm blown away. But what is a real privilege is when a group of your peers, people that many of whom you look up to, are willing to come out and listen to you as well. And when Tim offered me the gift of the opportunity to come and speak to you, I jumped at it, and I just thought it would be absolutely amazing. So thanks very, very much, everyone. I know it's a shitty night and it's cold, and here we are. But there's a challenge for me. As like I looked around the room, and when you're speaking to professional speakers, one of the biggest challenges is we're all at different stages. We're all in different places. And now, Paul, I don't know if you're well done babing. I'm assuming it's not for me, but I'm going to take it anyway. Well done to you too, sugar tits. Okay, too much? I don't know. Okay, so when you're speaking to a group of professional speakers and a group of experts, one of the challenges is that you're going to say something very, very obvious to many, many people. We're going to say something that a lot of other humans in the space already know. And so there may be things that, I don't know if you want to just close that down, that whiteboard. There may be things that I say that some of you have already figured out. And for that, I apologize. I guess the talk is for people who do worry about maybe their scale, their impact, and what they want to achieve. And a lot of where I'm sharing from at the moment is, I guess, from my own position of self-doubt and questioning my own relevance and do I still have something worth saying to audiences? And it's also based on a lot of the work that I do with the speakers on our Story to Stage program, Gavin, Ingrid, and many, many others. And it comes down to one of the biggest problems I see with speakers when they're trying to scale. And that is they want to have bigger, broader reach, but they suffer a problem that I refer to as the stone's throw problem. So they are a stone's throw speaker in that you can throw a stone and hit another speaker that's speaking about their topic. And this is the problem. If you want to scale and go around the world, then we need to have a topic that other people aren't doing. There needs to be something we're saying that is that aha moment. When I spoke for the PSASA in Cape Town, I spoke about the Julian Shapiro's 4 novelties. You want to be counterintuitive, you want to be counter-narrative, you want to have shock and awe, or you want to have an elegant articulation on an idea that people haven't heard before. And so I want to share with you a little bit about where I'm at and how I've got down that journey and how I try to think of myself as a subject matter expert. And I often try to think, one of the other mistakes I find a lot of speakers do, and this is maybe going to sound somewhat counterintuitive or maybe even counter-narrative, but I think one of the biggest mistakes speakers make is they write the talk for the audience. They don't write the talk for the person booking them. So I write talks for people who pay people to speak. And then once I get paid to speak, then I make sure that I write the talk that an audience would want to hear. But my number one job is that I am not speaking. I'm not building a talk for, the 1,000 people I'm going to speak to in this tour that I'm on at the moment. I'm building the talk for the CEO of the business that wanted me to come out and do that. And this does seem, when I brought it up on our speaking program, a lot of people challenged that. So shouldn't it be about the change we want to make? And absolutely. But I think that is something that will happen. You see, if you write a talk that your client would want to pay you for, well, then they wouldn't ask you to do that talk if they didn't think that the other humans would want to receive it. But if you write a talk for the other humans, often the person who is booking you thinks, well, what's in this for me? I'm the one, the audience isn't paying you the 100,000 Rand to come and speak. I'm the one paying you that. Therefore, I want to make sure that you're going to check a box for me. So that's one of the big things. I'm gonna try and explore to you how I think about this and how I'm busy thinking about this to try and make sure that, as I turn 50 this year in October, that I am still relevant and I've still got something in the tank. To illustrate this at the beginning, though, I think I should start with a bit of an apology, and that is, as a speaker, I started speaking 21 years ago, and I am absolutely 100% a fraud. When I started speaking, I did not have any of my own content whatsoever. In fact, all I did is I did talks by other people's books. So my first ever keynote I did was a book on Seth Godin's Purple Cow. I actually tried to get Seth Godin to come out and speak at the conference. He said, my kids are too young and South Africa's too far. So I mailed back and said, can I do it then? And he was like, sure, buy some copies of books for the audience, give them out. And he signed them. And then I did the talk. I got then booked for more and more and more at the back of that. I then wanted to be able to go back to the same client. So I wrote another talk based on the second book, Survival is Not Enough. He was like down with that. Every time I did the talk, I bought books for every audience member. That was the deal. And then finally, I started doing Jim Collins. Everybody wanted Jim Collins. Everyone was all big up and good to great. And I thought, well, if they want Jim Collins and they can't afford him, I'm going to be like Jim Collins from Temu. I'm going to be the cheap version of that. And it turns out that there was a massive audience for that. And as a funny aside, this trend of building keynotes based on other humans' books is something that we believe in so much that we actually created a free service. Any of you are welcome to download at any given time, called Atomic Talks. And atomictalks.com is basically, I think leaders need to present more. I think they need to practice more presenting in public. They don't do it until the stakes are so high. And so we took a whole bunch of business books and we turned them into 15-minute presentable talks. And we did, and it's all free, 100% free. You download the talk, the Prezi file or the PowerPoint file. You get the training video and you can present it to your team. And I think we sometimes spend far too much time creating new content, especially when we're starting, when there is great content out there that just other humans don't have access to. Now, luckily, I'm in a slightly different position. I've managed to build some credibility for myself. As mentioned, I've spoken in, it's actually 44 countries now on 6 continents. And there's a whole bunch of other things that lots of podcasts, lots of things. And the social proof is there. And I'm finally starting to believe in some of my own content. And this is a big part of what led me to actually starting our Story to Stage speaking program, because I thought that people need to get unstuck from this space. And where most of our speakers are stuck is that they haven't yet figured out their area of authority. So they've not really got to the point where they know what is the corner of the universe that I want to own. And I think this is a problem. I think that we need to consider it. So how do we do that? And that's the question I want to kind of ask today. I want to hopefully answer for you. And I've just prepared this bit of content at the beginning as a conversation starter. If you have any other questions whatsoever, again, when you're speaking to a whole bunch of experts, where do you begin? I'm going to answer as many of the questions as I possibly can. I'm in no rush. I'm happy to stay as long as needs be. But the question I thought I would pose is, how do I define my area of authority and where does it start? And I want to go to war with one idea. And the one thing that I find a lot of speakers are told all over again. In fact, there's a speaking program that I know, and basically the whole advertising is that, come over here and, feel your story. Everybody has got a story. Just tell your story. And I've got a slight problem with that. I don't think your story is that important. I don't think your audience cares about your story. I think they care about their story. And the only thing they care about your story for is insofar as it can help them write a better version of their own. Right? So a lot of people think, I just want to tell my story. It's so interesting, but everyone has a story. And your story doesn't make you unique. So do stories have a role? Absolutely. I think a lot of speakers are asking the wrong question. What they do is they think of themselves as very interesting. Now bear in mind, you may have an interesting story, but if your story is interesting, and I'll talk about the categories of speakers where I think this is different, because I certainly think there is a version of speakers that should be telling their story, but it does make it hard to get rebooked over and over again. So a lot of speakers start by thinking, hey, I have a story to tell. Let me try and figure out what point I want to make. This is who I am. This is my story. This is what I did. I started a company. I did this. Like, what's the point here? What can I say to them that would be interesting? I think our framing is wrong. I think what we need to be thinking of as speakers is that I have a point that I want to make. There's something I want to say. I have a burning idea inside my brain, and it frustrates me that the other humans aren't getting it. And I want to just figure out, and then I go into my own stories and I think, this happened to me in this meeting once, and this can probably illustrate that. So I think that we're approaching our speaking in the wrong way. We're approaching our speaking as if it's about us, as opposed to being about, again, the people who want to book us, and of course about their audience. So I think we also need to understand another thing about area of authority is, because one of the things that everybody does is get very introspective, like, what am I an expert on? What's going on? And for me, your area of authority is a destination. Not a departure point. Your area of authority isn't where you are today. It's where you hope to be the more you speak about it. I'm sure every single one of you every time you get booked for a gig and you want to refresh your talk, you become a little bit smarter. Because what will happen is you'll take a brief from a company in a sector, maybe you've not delivered that talk to, and this might be a group of people in mining. So you start doing some research, and then you become a smarter subject matter in your area. Today, I was speaking for a whole bunch of people in retail. So on the weekend, when I was flying down from Dubai, I loaded up a ton of, I probably watched about 3 hours of retail trends, just so I could draw some more content around that, the intersection of my topic, relentless relevance, and retail. And so I became smarter as I was going. This is something I care about. How do we make more industries relevant? And so that's what it is. So the 3 questions I think that we should be asking is, how much does it excite me? And I think this is very, very important, right? Because as you all know, the first rule of public speaking is your audience can never enjoy receiving a talk more than you enjoy delivering it. We call this the Amsterdam Principle, based on a show I once watched in Amsterdam, and I realized, oh, wow, they're not having fun. This is not nearly as sexy as I thought it would be. And it really is the first rule of presenting. Your audience can't enjoy receiving a talk more than you enjoy delivering it. And if you do not want to get bored of your talk, you better be excited about your area of authority, about your subject matter, because that way you want to write new content and new things about it. The second is, how crowded is this space? If you're speaking about a topic you really, really care about, but you're in a very, very crowded space, you will be a stone's throw speaker. And then I'm using Prezi, is the software I'm using, Michael. Just standard Prezi video, but I just build the Prezi deck elsewhere. And then the other one is, what's my experience? So let's go into these a little bit. Let's start off with how much does it excite me? And I think this is important. Not to be too much of a crack record, but I think this is the universal truth. And I thought long and hard about this. I think it's not about what you're excited to teach. It should always be, what are you excited to learn? Your talk, your area of authority in your talk should stem from your place of highest curiosity. Because if you're curious about it, you will always be excited and you will always want to grow in that regard. So that's my entry point to everything, is what fires your brain? Because again, for me, the first principle of speaking, if you get onto a stage, the number one job that you have to do when you are on stage, the number one thing is you have to open with clarity on your topic and curiosity. That's how for me, that's the opening. The first 2 or 3 minutes, if the audience needs to be clear on your topic and curious about it. So, I know we're talking about banking, but you made me think about this in a slightly different way. What am I curious about? And that's the most important thing. Now, if you want your audience to be curious about it, you can't get them there unless you were. So you have to be curious about a topic. If you've turned around and again, please, I happen to go to war with the idea of personal purpose. It's not for me. I don't think it's, certainly, Ingrid, Gavin, and I have had a big debate. I go to war with the idea of maybe empathy. And so I will challenge these concepts. If you've just basically, though, taken other people's content, like, oh, I want to talk to you about finding your why, there's no curiosity there. We all know that. We've all heard that. We all saw the same little talk with the circles. And I mean, more power to Simon Sinek, from absolutely being amazing at owning one word. That's brilliant. But there's no curiosity there. Like, we kind of know where you're going with this talk. But if you're curious about this and you start questioning this idea of maybe personal purpose, like, hold on a second, is having a personal purpose a good thing? What if it's a hindrance? What if it's a bad thing? I happen to think it actually is. And I think that it's leading us to a lot of the mental health problems that we have in the world today. But when I started getting curious about it, that started making me want to do research. And then I did the research, and then I went into a rabbit hole where the gaps in my knowledge appeared. And then I was able to start finding some cool things. That helped me create an opening that my audience knew what I was talking about, but also that I had previously been curious about, and then that's where I was able to go. So what are you excited to learn? Whatever you're excited to learn is the root of your next keynote. The next question, obviously, you have to ask when you get it is, because we want to make money here, is, how crowded is this space? And I think you have to be careful about that. There is obviously, the main things people want to talk about, like people, process, profit, like those kind of categories, the future of all of those things. I think almost, if you are a speaker in today's day and age, on almost every single topic you're talking about, we all have to be a little bit of a futurist, like 10% of that in there. We have to be learning from Arthur, and because people want a view of what the future of this looks like. But I remember years ago, there's a good friend of mine, a guy by the name of Mike Stopforth. I'm not sure if any of you know Mike. Wonderful guy. And he was one of the original bloggers in South Africa. We were all blogging. I had a blog called Joe Blog. That's how I actually met people like Arthur years and years ago. And Mike was frustrated because we were all blogging, but nobody was doing anything about it. And he felt like this should be a space that somebody should own. And somebody should be going to corporates and saying, you guys should be blogging. This is what you should be doing. And he actually came to my office at Missing Link and said, listen, I want to pitch you this idea. We should start something. We should do something really, really big and things like this. And he basically said that there is a vacancy in this space, that nobody is becoming the expert in this part of this thing. At the time, it was called social networking and blogging. It wasn't called social media, but nobody was becoming the expert. And none of us were picking it up. And Mike was so frustrated. And he went to a whole bunch of different bloggers, all who had businesses. And eventually, and at the time, he worked, he'd done some speaking, but he worked at Extreme 16, you know, the 4x4 place in 4 ways. And eventually, he's like, no, this is ridiculous. And he started this business called Cerebra. And he built that business up. He sold it for an absolute fortune to one of the big agencies. And he was the guy that you went, if you wanted to learn about how big brands should do social media, you went to Mike. And that's why we started referring to this as stop horse law. And stop horse law says in any area that lacks an expert, whoever puts their hand up first becomes it. So as speakers, what we're trying to do is find the part of our topic that says, what is the thing that humans care about right now? And what is the intersection that I can find about that topic that makes me different? So people care about AI right now, but what do they care? What will make me different? If I'm just speaking about AI, that might not be. So the AI stuff that we speak about happens to speak about the idea that we're learning too much from AIs and we're not learning enough from other humans. And I'll explain, it's a whole long thing I can go into later. But I'm trying to find an area in which stop horse law can kick in. And that's the whole idea, is that we want to kind of create this wedge. We want to go narrow down in our area of authority. AI is fine, but it's broad. And for now, that's okay. But if we can go lower and lower, eventually when we get there, we get into that area of authority. That's when the magic starts happening, when we can start to figure out what this is. And the narrower we go down, the less people are. So at the surface level of your topic, there's lots of humans. At the bottom of your topic, there's not. And when I spoke to the PSASA in Cape Town, I spoke a lot about intersections. And it's a topic I speak about in my book, Here Be Dragons. But it's that the idea we should all be, the category we speak about is the Y factor. And what makes us different is the X. And our brand exists on the corner of X and Y. Right? That whole thing in pop idols, the X factor, you know, you're going to have the X factor. That's our thing. And we need to know both those coordinates. I speak in the subject of this, but I speak like that. Hollywood would say something like, when they design films, they'll say, it's like Die Hard, but on a bus. Right? It's like Braveheart, but in ancient Rome. And people understand so much about that. They can get it. Ooh, action film on a bus. Of course, that became Speed and Gladiator. But they know so much from what, oh, this is something I really, really like and care about. But here's a ripple that makes it different. And that is what puts you in your area of authority. And then the third thing, and that's this: what is my experience? And I think this is where people get put off a lot, to think, well, I don't know too much about this topic. This is a problem for me. And they struggle a lot with this kind of imposter syndrome or imposter theory. And I think that we're thinking about the world too much of what's behind us and not enough on what's in front of us. One of my favorite thinkers in the world today is a gentleman by the name of Tim Urban. I'm not sure if any of you know Tim Urban. He wrote a book called Wait, But Why? He did one of my favorite TED Talks ever. It was the talk on procrastination. If you search Tim Urban, TED, procrastination, and he drew about the procrastination monkey and things like that. It's a wonderful talk and well worth watching. But he drew this thing and he said, you know, we think about ourselves in the wrong way. He says, you should be thinking about it like this. He said, you know, our life is that little green line. And there's this whole web of things behind us. And when you look back, it looks like one line. But when you get to the point where you are today, when you look forward, it could go any number of ways. Even at 49 years old, I think, wow, I'm not done. There's so much more I can do. And I think this is such a cool concept that we can engage with, because it gives us permission to say, okay, I'm curious about this. The audience cares about this. I can live at the intersection of my current experience and this future stuff. And what I've realized is that your history is not your legacy. And maybe for some of it is. But I'm hoping that the cover of the book of my life, right? If my wife one day wanted to write a book of my life, I'm really, really hoping that the photograph that encapsulates that has not been taken yet. I really, really hope that that is yet to happen, that I'm still about to create my legacy and I'm still working towards it because I'm still curious. So this is the big thing. But it comes down to how we think about ourselves. And so this one, I wanted to talk a bit about I said earlier about your story, and I recognize that there are some people that absolutely should be telling their story. And I loosely divide speakers into, we've got about 6 categories, but I loosely divide them into one of 2 categories. Most speakers are either an Olympiad or they're a journalist. Okay, so let's talk about Olympiads. And to me, Olympiads are the people who will tell their story. So if you're, we work with some speakers, like say, working with Corne Krieger, for example, Oscar Chalapsky, Joey Evans. These are Olympiads. These are people who've done, and I say Olympiad, they all happen to be sports people. But we also, Bruce Whitfield and Fusi Tepekwaya, like these people are in their field. They're considered to be very, very, big experts. And I guess the way that I define this to you is is your area of authority something that other humans cannot or do not want to do? Okay, so one speaker we're working with at the moment was in a terrorist attack and had to run away, like a Black Hawk Down type of scene. And at the end of that, a whole bunch of family members were killed. It was horrific. And he tells a harrowing story of that. Now, I refer to him as an Olympiad because, of course, nobody wants to go through that. That story is something that we need to hear about. We'll never understand that ourselves. But another speaker we were working with once wanted to build a keynote around facing fear based on her doing some shark cage diving. And I said, well, I don't think there's enough of a talk there because, shark cage diving it's cool and all, and I get that you faced your fear, but that's not enough for people to say, whoa. One of the speakers we work with has more people have walked on the moon than have surfed waves the size that he has surfed. Right? That's Olympia. That's doing crazy, crazy things. So I think there's a lot of space for Olympiads. The one area I guess I've spoken about, or I've owned a presentation company since I was 22 years old. I'm 49 now. I've been a speaker for 21 years. I've worked with many, many, many top executives, training them and developing presentations for them. In that tiny little area of presentation strategy, which is not a topic I get hired to speak about a lot, but in that tiny area, I would put myself as an Olympiad. For the rest of the time, though, I realize that I'm absolutely a journalist. That's the category I'm in. And I think I'm in good company. Like for years, my favorite speaker of all time was this guy, Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell is a journalist. Now, I'm sure many of you have probably heard about that famous 10,000 hours, right? We've all heard about the 10,000 hours and things like this. And if you ask people like, oh, the 10,000 hours, they'll all say, oh, yeah, then Malcolm Gladwell. But then if you ask people, hey, do you know who Anders Ericsson is? Most people say, well, no, Anders Ericsson, no, name doesn't ring a bell. And so that's funny because in the book where Outliers, where Malcolm Gladwell was talking about the 10,000 hours, he was actually talking about a theory based on a researcher who did a research with 30 violinists, and that researcher's name was Anders Ericsson. And the 10,000 hours was his. Now, I'm not saying this to be disparaging to Gladwell. I'm saying that the journalist role has so much value in it because Anders Ericsson, who's come up with some really, really great theories, incidentally, this is not one of them. In fact, Anders Ericsson has spent the rest of his career going to war with saying, people, this has been taken out of context, stop trusting journalists. This is not what I meant. Another example of this to a lot of us in our industry is the Moravian myth. Alfred Moravian came up with that study, and you've all heard speakers talk about the fact that only 5% of what you remember is what people say, and 70% is their body language, and 20% is your tone of voice. I mean, it's absolute bullshit. If that was the case, if the only 5% of the words only mattered 5%, all of you would be just fine watching, Korean dramas without the subtitles on. Okay, but it's not true. And Alfred Moravian has spent his entire life saying, guys, you've taken it totally out of context. It was a tiny study that I did using 8 people, and all it was if you only had one word, then emotion went more. So if you ask somebody, how are you? And this was the word they used in the study, and that person said, I'm fine. Well, then the way they say it, I'm fine, is a lot more important than the word fine. And that was that. But anyway, Gladwell is amazing because he speaks about these things. But Gladwell does not, none of the topics that Gladwell writes about is he an expert in. None of them. Gladwell doesn't pretend to be the expert in all of these things. Gladwell says that I've done the research and spoken to the experts. And this is an amazing space for most of us to play. If we are only relying on the poverty of the tiny bit of information that we already know, then we're really, really not in good shape. But if we can build up from the research of other great people, synthesize that, and then create our point that exists at our intersection, then I think we become highly relevant. And so that's it for me. That's where I want to do. Right? I want to get to the point. Again, I want to reiterate, it's not about what you're excited to teach, it's about what you're excited to learn. So the question, I guess I want to leave you with, and before I open up to questions for you, is what would you like to be known for? What is that thing? If you could choose to be known for anything, what would it be? And give some thought to that. And it doesn't have to be what you're known for now. It wants to be, what would you want to be known for? And the one little caveat I want to give on all of these things, and we could have done a whole talk on this, and it was one of my considerations, but I decided in the end, I touched on this a lot more in the talk I did for PSASA Cape Town, so I didn't do it. But it is, if we recognize that most of us are going to be in the position of being somewhat, we're going to be the journalist, well, then we're possibly not the smartest person in the room. There's possibly other experts out there. And then I would want to turn around and say, and I recognize that I've not been nearly entertaining enough in this one. I've tried to just be more, I guess, informative. But that is this. If you are not the smartest person on your topic, you had better be the most entertaining. Sometimes I feel like people forget that we are, and we all want to think that we're intellectually brilliant and we've got so much great things to share. But 60% of your speaking fee goes in because you give people a good time. I always joke that every belly laugh I get from an audience increases my speaking fee by $500. If the more you make an audience talk, and I will certainly increase the referability of my talk by just that much. So that's it for me. I'm very, very happy to answer any questions. I apologize if I lost any of you by going into a topic that you all know too much about, but I hope some of you found it helpful and informative, and I'm very, very happy if you disagree with me completely, and happy to have a discussion about that.